everybody. Welcome to Pine Island Research. It must be Monday night because that's the only reason why we'd probably be here. So, wanted to thank Judy Wheeler, Sharon Guy, Mike from Long Island Bigfoot, Howling Underdog Films. We've got some of our friends from Untold Radio in the chat. We've got Cindy Finn is here. My Eyes, Faster Man is here. Sandra Piper, of course. Mr. Lee 3PO, Donald Fuller, Brown Dwarf. Nice to see you guys. Judy Wheeler here. I might have said Judy's name. Brian and Chewy Go Hiking is here. Mike is here. Texas Jack. Let's see. Who else do we got? Jen. Thanks for showing up. Nikki from Hairy Man Hoaxes and Hoodwinks. She's got a channel there on YouTube. You're welcome to go search that up. Let's see. Who else? Uncle Bones is here, of course. Great to see you. B is here. Man, it's exciting. Raptor Crazy's in the house. It's awesome. Pat from Squatch Talk is here. Nancy Malcolm is here. I'll tell you what, guys, this is our first show here at Untold Radio Network. I'm excited. We've got some great guests lined up tonight, and I'm excited about that. I thought first I'd start with, because I knew we'd get a lot of our usual chat members from our Pine Island Research channel that we've had for around 8 or 9 months here on YouTube. We joined the Untold Radio Network. We're going to start doing our show on Monday nights here, this being the first, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central. We've been telling our folks, we normally average between 45 and 50 people in live chat. We were telling them, get over here to Untold Radio and like and subscribe now so that you're there when we flip the light switch on. So I knew we'd see a lot of these names in chat that we normally see. But we're going to have a lot of new folks joining us because, as you know, Untold Radio, maybe you don't know, but on Untold Radio, we're going to have on 7 nights a week, there's going to be a show on. We've got 8 different shows, 8 different sets of hosts, shows from the Sasquatch subject to the paranormal subject. Doug's show, the founder of Untold Radio, Doug Hychek, his show is on Untold Radio on Wednesday nights. He has a little bit of everything on his show, and it is interesting. He'll have some Sasquatch encounter guests. People who maybe work in different types of ufology research or ghosts or different areas of the paranormal. He's even had the head photographer for the Rolling Stones for 4 decades came on one night and told stories about touring with the Stones for 40 years and backstage stories, hotel stories, him and Mick Jagger. I mean, Doug was never going to bring you a guest that's not interesting. I can guarantee you that. But it's just a great example of how you're going to have 7 nights of programming here on the Untold Radio Network that's going to cover a lot of different stuff. There's about 3 of the shows, including ours, that focus primarily just on Sasquatch and Sasquatch research, Sasquatch encounters. And I wanted to start out by taking a moment to talk about who I am and who Pine Island Research is, because we're going to have some new folks joining us in chat, people watching the video that maybe isn't familiar with us. I'm not blind to the fact that I'm not famous, okay? So a lot of people are going to say, who is this guy? My name is Jeff Harding. I own a real estate firm in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I also have a small one in northern Minnesota and a lake home up there, and that's where primarily most of my research is done. It is in the Pine Island State Forest of northern Minnesota, which is just east of Upper and Lower Red Lake. It's the top 4th of Minnesota geographically, and it stretches all the way to the Boundary Waters Canoe area on the Canadian border. I got started in Sasquatch research simply by having an encounter when I was 18 years old in 1987. I was in the northern third of Manitoba, right across the Saskatchewan border, east of there in Manitoba, on the Churchill Reservoir, where I came face to face with a Sasquatch when I was 18 years old. I knew nothing about Sasquatch. I mean, I'd seen the PG film clip at a matinee movie on a Saturday afternoon, but I didn't grow up in a family that had an uncle that told stories about Sasquatch and things like that. I did grow up the son of a hunting and fishing guide. So big game hunting, being in the remote wilderness of Montana, Wyoming, Canada, northern Minnesota, Michigan, that wasn't strange to me. Hunting elk, mule deer, moose, bear, I was doing that starting when I was 13, 14 years old. I love being in the outdoors. I've got two sons that are 17 and 18, and they've taken on that love for the outdoors and being in the remote areas. But right after that encounter, I joined the Army. And for 6 years, I was in the U.S. Army, served in the 82nd Airborne and the 29th Infantry Regiment, where I held a security clearance as an EOD technician. And I was a little worried about talking to anybody about my encounter. I didn't know if they'd think I was crazy and pull my security clearance. After I got out of the military, I was in college for a couple of years and got a degree. Didn't really find anybody I related to there that seemed like somebody you could talk to about such a thing. And when I started my business, I grew a real estate firm with some developers, some friends of mine who are fairly wealthy. They are big investors in my future and my career. I was a little worried about what would happen if I had one of those relationships fall out by publicly talking about it. So I went a long time not talking about it. But during that time, I could relive that encounter like a movie in my head. I saw it over and over. It wasn't something where I just saw something walk across the road for a moment. The whole entire encounter lasted over 20 minutes. I was standing on a game trail. I was with two other friends and found myself about 15 feet away from it when it stepped out, and it was holding a birch log about 5 foot long at its waist. And as I looked at it up and down, it shucked this log at me and hit me and knocked me down backwards down the game trail, which was about a 25 to 30 degree slope. We saw it again when it walked out on the beach. So it was a prolonged encounter, enough to know that I wasn't looking at a bear. I wasn't dealing with any big game animal. And unless I was looking at a human that had somehow gotten out of its niche to develop the height of 9.5, 10 foot and a body structure of between probably 1,100 and 1,200 pounds, it didn't make sense that it was a human either. It was a pretty traumatic experience trying to make sense of it. And I thought about it for a long time. And about 3-4 years ago, I'd reached a point in my career where I really didn't care if I made any more money. I didn't care if I lost friends or investors by talking about it. I do still guide hunters on our land and up in Montana and Wyoming. I've had other hunting guides that I've met that have had experiences. And it made me realize that I'm not alone in this. And so I started talking openly about it. The last thing I felt this community needed was another YouTube show about Sasquatch, right? But I was noticing that so many of them were just shock value, kind of three-ring circuses almost. I mean, it was almost like the more shocking we could title a show, maybe the more people would show up. And I really wanted to do a show that focused on research, technology, and the tools that we use in Sasquatch research. I'd spent months talking to Doug Hychek about a technique that I thought would work that I didn't see anybody else doing. We developed that in our conversations for a couple months, and when I employed it, it ended up working. And during the course of 37 weeks last year, we collected 24 hair samples and 13 sebum or skin oil samples out of one area in the Pine Island Forest in northern Minnesota. We're going to be analyzing them, putting them in the labs, and the data will be utilized likely in the Legend Meets Science 2 production when that eventually comes out. I've got a plan for 2023 for a completely different research technique that I'm going to try that I don't see anybody else doing. And we'll talk more openly about that on future episodes. But that's how Pine Island research came to be, is the northern Minnesota area, focusing on the extreme northern Minnesota and Boundary Waters area, maybe some areas in Canada across the border. But it all stemmed from an encounter in Manitoba. And for those of you who are a little curious about where we're talking about here, this is the upper Midwest, the Dakotas, Minnesota. Down here where you see my cursor is where Sioux Falls, South Dakota is, and where I live with a real estate firm there. Like I say, we have a lake home in Bemidji, Minnesota up here, where there is a state forest called the Pine Island State Forest here. It's by Upper and Lower Red Lake, and this is the Canadian border. So we are talking very northern Minnesota here. And you can see as we zoom in all these little towns here of, 500 to 1,000 people. They're not very big. But in the Pine Island State Forest, it is solid, thick state protected forest that does have some trail systems, remote trail systems that go through it, but there are no towns, there are no roads. It's a very remote area. And that area goes all the way up to where you'll see where International Falls starts, which is on the Canadian-Minnesota border. And that forms the Boundary Waters Canoe area, which travels all the way down here to where you will eventually get down here to Lake Superior. You see the Duluth area over here. What's interesting about this area in the Boundary Waters Canoe area is about 30 to 40 miles south of the border, if you follow my cursor here, and then go north of the border about 70 to 80 miles, and you draw almost roughly 150 to 180 mile long area here. Solid forest, solid waterways that are all connected for the most part that create the Boundary Waters Canoe area. There are no roads here. You can, as we zoom in on it, you'll see this is very, very dense, remote area, tons of lakes and waterways, tons of live game, wild, big game animals. But you also see that here north of the Red Lake area on the Red Lake Reservation. Thick forests, no roads. These little lines you see, most of them are power line cuts. Very remote areas there and in the Pine Island Forest here. If you walk 10 miles, you might cross a remote hiking trail or a power line cut, but there just aren't towns and roads there. It's just so remote. But that's just a little idea of where Pine Island Research is located, a little bit about us. Hopefully it answers some of your questions about who is this guy and what's his story. I'm really interested in getting into tonight's guests. Joining us is Brian Hulan and Shane Church. They are with the Southern Bigfoot Alliance. And I'd tell you all about them. I'd rather just bring them in and let them tell you about them, because these guys, the one thing that I have noticed, they're like brothers. You start sensing that when you spend time with them and talking to them. They got their own personalities, but they just click so well. They're co-hosts on a show on YouTube, and you can just sense why they spend their time together researching. And so Let's bring them in. Here we got Brian and Shane. How are you guys doing?
Who is Brian?
Yeah, Shane. I never met that guy.
Strangers I picked up downtown at the hardware store. And
Oh man,
I really don't even like that guy. So
that hardware store must have been between Oklahoma and Texas.
right on the Red River, buddy. Right on the Red River.
Oh man, I'll tell you what. So I was going to have you guys on last week on Pine Island Research's last show on our old channel, and unfortunately, I don't remember if it was Shane or Brian. I think it was Shane. Did you have a death in the family? Your grandmother passed away, something?
Yeah.
Well, our condolences go out to you for that.
Thank you.
I understand that that's a tough thing to deal with, but
yeah.
Okay. But you know, so I had to make a new thumbnail, and we said, let's do it next week if it works. But last week's thumbnail I was kind of excited about because they had each sent me pictures. Brian sent me a great headshot square on, and Shane's picture just didn't look right. His picture didn't look right. So I went on his Facebook and looked at all the different pictures, and there was a picture of him profiled kissing his wife's cheek. So I background removed that and made the thumbnail of him kissing Brian on the cheek.
Man, it's just not that far fetched, though, man. Really.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, that's if we would have looked harder, Jeff, we'd have found an actual picture of that.
Well, so I made the whole thumbnail and I sent it in your messenger thinking I'm gonna prank these guys. And instead I get messages back on, that's awesome. That's sure you use that.
Yeah, that's how you do.
Yeah, it doesn't bother us one bit. So, you can share that with the viewers if you want. We're not afraid. So
your sense of humor just flexed further than I thought it would. So I didn't achieve the.
He was like, "Damn it, I almost made it."
Yeah, you only scratched the surface, Jeff. So our shenanigans can be a little much. So
there's a cat fight right there. See the cat fight? Cat fight.
Background entertainment. So,
yes, sir.
There's always cat fights in the background when Shane's on. Those girls fighting over who gets to say hi first.
Oh,
so you guys are from Oklahoma?
I'm from Oklahoma.
Okay. Texas. All right. So tell us about the Southern Bigfoot Alliance. How did this come about? How long ago was it?
2017.
Yeah,
2017.
Yep.
Actually, we can thank Dustin Clark. He kind of gathered all of us together. We were in another Bigfoot group, and we were kind of wanting to, I don't know, we were like branching out automatically. Like, what we can do something different here.
We wanted to do better.
Cool.
And that's what we did. We just started it and rolled with it.
When you say you wanted to do better, were you frustrated with how it seemed different researchers were going about things, or maybe just weren't coming up with results and thought there's a better way to do this? Or
I think the big thing is a lot of those guys were just more talk than show, you know? Mm-hmm. And so they get on the platforms and Facebook or whatever it is, and they talk a big game, but we didn't see a lot of action. We didn't see a lot of people actually out, you know, hitting the woods and boots on the ground type deal. And then whenever they did do that, it seemed like they were real reluctant to share any of that information, even within the own group, you know, like they were just like, hey, we had this awesome encounter. We got these great photos, but we're going to hold on to them for right now. We'll release those in 25 years and we may share them with you guys if you're still alive. And that was one thing that really frustrated us. So we decided when we started this group, and I believe originally there were 6 of us, right? Shane?
Yeah.
6 or 7. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure we really emphasize that word alliance and make sure that we really reached out to other groups, especially in the Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas area, and brought those in, you know, because we can't do this alone. You know what I mean? That the area down here that we research mostly in Southeast Oklahoma is just too vast for, you know, 6 guys to get out there and beat the brush. We'll never find anything. It's not even a needle in a haystack. It's a needle in a pile of needles, right? And so we figured we could branch out to these other groups, bring them in, you know, get a feel for those guys, and then start hand selecting certain individuals to actually build our group bigger and better. So,
sure.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like that for some reason, that's where the bar has been stuck in the community for a long time. And that's that if they are releasing anything, 95% of it's stuff that is nothing. And the ones that do come up with something either don't release it or they present it as fact or which, if we're being honest, if we're really trying to advance the science, we have to approach all of our theories and all of our data with the same tenacity to disprove it as we are to prove it, right? I mean, we can't be so hopeful that we look at a blurry picture and say, oh, come on, you got to be able to see that, right? And the idea of vetting it and sending, getting a if you've got something on video, having somebody like Doug Hychek strip down the metadata and look at it, or if you've got a cast print, having somebody like Meldrum or somebody give their opinion of it. It just, which, I get it. Yeah, everybody's got fans. And like I say, I'm not vain enough to think everybody's my fan for sure. But there's people out there who kind of approach it with this tainted perspective that I don't need people to vet what I do. If I say this is what it is, you better take my word. How dare you not take my word for it? Things like that. So you kind of see it from all angles in the community, and it just seems like, where's that common sense approach down the middle of the road saying, let's work together, let's learn from each other as well as teach each other, and see if we can advance the science and get the ball down the road. It just doesn't seem like it happens as much as it should.
Well, one thing with us is, like, I love Brian. Brian loves, we're like bros, but we don't agree on everything.
Yeah.
Like, and that's okay, because our whole, group of guys, they have different opinions, different approaches. Everybody sees something different all the time. And I think as a collective, we're a powerhouse. And of course, along with that, Brian has like the best luck, and he's a conduit for this kind of thing that it's amazing. If you'd have told me that when I got into this, that I was going to be able to see a footprint in the ground like 18 months into it, I would have said, you're crazy, because I don't even believe this yet.
Yeah.
But just the collective thought process with everybody, because we all think differently, and following up on leads and just working, it did come to that. It came to that. And it's been outstanding. Like I don't even have words for it. I don't even know how to express it.
Well, there's such power that comes in having the right group of people, because everybody brings something different to the table, right? There's always that one guy who's the voice of reason that'll ground everybody when they're flying so high or too excited about something. And then there's somebody who's maybe their strong suit is my weak suit, and maybe my strong suit is your weak suit, and you start getting that right chemistry with the right group of guys, that when you find it, you realize you're not always gonna, like you say, you're not always gonna agree on everything. But that's why, if you did always agree on everything, you wouldn't be doing anything to advance the science. It's just, you've got to be your own most healthy skeptic. And if you can create a group of people where that exists, that's something special, I think.
Yeah. I mean, even in the beginning, like, Shane was talking about, we have an area in Oklahoma that we call Camp Bison, southeast Oklahoma, just north of Broken Bow, just south of Smithville. And when we went public with that, we put that area out there like, hey, this is where we're getting these calls from. This is where we're having all this, we had rock throwing, things like that. We put it out there for every group, and we did a huge open invite. And I believe one time we had like 40, 45 people that showed up, and man, we caught so much grief over that. People were just shocked that how can you disclose your main research area? Well,
it was almost like, why did you do that?
Yeah, because no one else does it. And so we took all those 40, 45 people that showed up, that gave us a chance to comb through some people, see them in action, see them in the field, see their thought processes, see how they do things, see if we could trust them. And we start hand picking those guys and just kind of just bringing them in close. And I mean, it's paid huge dividends for us. So
It's many points of view. Many points of view.
Well, and I think that's what, when you see different groups, whether we're talking conventions or whether we're talking about campouts or whatever, I think that's probably the one thing that those things do the most to advance the science, is bring that fellowship together. Is, people talk about Carrie and the 168, and people said, well, the pictures weren't as clear as I didn't like this, or I didn't like, everybody's so critical. And I said, the one thing he did do is he brought a bunch of guys together, a bunch of people together, men and women, who spent days and days amongst each other, sharing experiences and learning from each other and sharing theories or ideas. And, if we're all looking at it as if we are all students and we're all the professors, we learn from each other and we teach each other. And I think that alone probably works to advance the science faster than any blurry picture or blurry video or, another story to share. I think that's invaluable stuff. So when you guys have something like that where you get all those people together, there's always going to be people that are critical. Why did you do this? Why did you disclose this?
yeah, we got a ton of backlash.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh.
But we were also the new kids. That was another thing too. You're talking several guys from different groups that kind of banded together to create this thing. And so I think they just looked at it like, what are these guys doing?
Like from different states.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. Like I said, I don't regret the decision. I know when we originally talked about it, even like how we don't agree with each other, like Shane was saying earlier, even when we talked about disclosing that, it was a big discussion, because some of the guys didn't want to do it, some of the guys did, and we had to go back and forth of why we should, why we shouldn't. I mean, it wasn't like we just got on a Facebook call and said, here's what we're doing.
Yeah, it wasn't a split decision at all. It was
no, not at all. So
it took some time.
There were some guys that were hard nosed on it, but we pitched our case and here we are. So
well, and you're always going to learn as we go. I mean, it's not like you guys had done that a dozen times before. This is kind of your first, it sounds like. So I mean, to look at it in retrospect, I know what that's like. I mean, I did a 37-week research project last year, and as we went, we shared a lot of it on different YouTube channels and talked openly about certain things. There was a couple of things that we kept under wraps as far as location-wise, but at the end, I look back at it and think, I don't regret sharing or making these decisions, but there's always one or two things that you think, I probably would have done that. And if we aren't doing that, then how are we making it better? I mean, for you guys to look back and say, we could have done this different. That's how you're going to make it better for the next one, So this area in Oklahoma, is that primarily the area you guys focus on, or do you guys get out in different areas?
Oh, wow. The areas have grown. So we have that area, which Brian just discussed. We have an area we call Squatch Creek, which we've gathered some really great track casts. Like I said, here, like this.
Yeah, that's it. That's
okay.
Really interesting.
And we don't have just one of those.
We got 14.
So what's 14 the length
over the span of 4 years?
Yeah,
the length of this is 16 inches.
And do you have an idea of what the width is across the?
I believe it's 7.5 across the toes and half at the heel.
And the fifth toe is right here. You can barely see it.
Yeah.
But it was on a hill or on a bank going toward the creek, a slope. So, the way the foot was, either the pinky toe didn't touch, or I actually have a picture of one of my wife's friends whose she has these feet, and I took pictures of her feet because her pinky toes are like this on her feet, like velociraptor claws. I'm like, well, what if that was the case?
Hope she's not watching, Shane. So
I hope not either. I might be
So
sleeping on the couch tonight. I don't know.
One of the different things about our show starting tonight is we're not just here on YouTube and on Facebook, but we're being shot across podcast streams and platforms all over, pretty much any podcast platform you'll find us airing on now. So there's a lot of people that are just listening. So I just want to, I'm trying to be mindful as a host as we go through that. What Shane just showed us was a casted print that it's roughly, you say about 16 inches long, 7.5 inches wide.
We call it a 16-inch.
Yeah. What's really interesting about that cast is, and you see some like this, where there is a significant gap between the big toe and that second toe. Some of them you see pretty well tight, and some of them you see with that gap.
Can I show you something really interesting about that cast real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you look at this right here, let's see, where's it at? Right here. There's like a, hang on, there it is. Right there. There's like a little hole. Looks like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Looks like a fingerprint pushed into it, almost about that size.
Okay. So
it's a little smaller than that. You'll see
it's way smaller. So I made a rubber mold around it, right? And that little thing right there, that's sticking into its foot. That's either a stick or a rock or something of that nature that pushed into the tissue
that is
of whatever this was.
Yeah.
So
you don't see many people who take the time to do that reverse mold on it. So you see it from the other.
I'm all about it. I'm all about it. I'm almost a podiatrist at this point.
Well, and Shane's background allows that detail.
I'm all about that feet. Oh, sorry.
So yeah, like Shane was telling you, we have 14 of these between the group. And they were different times. It wasn't like we found these all in one day, and just this is constant, going back, research and running teams in and out periodically. So it was over Shane was a 3.5 year span, I guess.
Yeah.
From the first one to the last one.
Well, I'll tell you, that's still quite a few of them for a 3.5 year span.
It is.
Mean,
for some reason, and I say they because Brian initially he cast in 2018 2 prints in the springtime. That following June, we got a 20-inch cast.
Mm-hmm.
I know, it sounds ridiculous. Sounds crazy. And then in 2019, they were together.
Well, people, really wrap their head around that. I mean, if you and I say this because a lot of people probably don't find themselves in that are watching the show or in the chat that probably don't get out in the woods and actually have ever seen a cast. But the idea of what has to occur for not just to get placed there, the timing, the right substrate to step into, to capture that print right. But now the timing for you to come across it usually would have to be within 48 hours for weather not to wash it away, for moisture not to dry up and cause it to shrink or crack, to find one in a pristine castable. You're talking 24 to within an hour to 48 hours. I think once you go past 48 hours, it gets tough.
Totally. It'll get trashed because just because of the wildlife
there is just, I mean, they just beat it down. The deer and the hogs that go through there.
We've got bobcats. We've got, oh my God, we got a whole, what is a big bunch of turkeys? What do they call it? They look like a gang, man. These turkeys are like, get out of my way.
I have the 20 right here if you want to take a look at it.
Yes.
So Nancy's asking, are we allowed to ask questions? Absolutely. This is an interactive show. If you've got questions, put them in all caps and we will get them up.
And actually, you can see that's a deer track right here in the middle.
That stepped in it afterwards.
And then between the toes after the fact.
Yeah, and right up there. Yeah.
Because it just filled with moisture, just kind of ponded up. And then the deer came in after, maybe later that day or the following day.
And that was caught in June. So it was pretty hot and crackled. And It
This
probably
is
shrunk a little
20
bit.
inches from toe to heel. So
Yep.
So not to break it down to a casting 101, but I mean, what kind of substance do you guys use to cast your tracks?
So we started off with just like regular old plaster of Paris type stuff. We kind of moved on to because Brian, he's in the fencing. He was in the fencing business, and he used it's kind of an additive. Is that right, Brian?
yeah,
Quick
it's a
rock
concrete additive, and I don't know if you can hear this or not, but this stuff sets
almost
up
sounds like
solid
porcelain.
in about 15 minutes,
Hmm.
and you can see the detail there. That's just deer and coyotes and stuff like that on it. It's
But
just
what
a
I love
skeleton
about
right
it
there.
is you can mix it water thin.
Yep.
You can
So the
mix it
detail
water
is a
thin.
lot better on this. So
So you mix it that thin, it will pour in and flow into existing dermal ridges or
yep, if you're able to find dermal ridges,
injury, cuts, scratches on the
Yeah.
surface.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. Okay, man,
And I should have brought the one
14
from the
tracks in
garage.
3.5 years. That's
Yeah, but here's the thing: is 14 tracks in 3.5 years, but hundreds of trips there with nothing.
Yeah.
oh
With
yeah,
nothing.
oh yeah,
Zero.
yeah.
That's where a lot of people look at it as like, man, you guys are the luckiest guys in the world.
No.
Nah, we're really not. We go there more times than not. And we got
Batteries and memory
nothing.
cards out the
Yeah.
A.
People don't see what you don't take the time to present.
Ticks.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
trip I came home and both of my eyes were swelled shut from poison sumac. Like
Yeah.
just complete. I looked like I was wearing some kind of skin mask right here. Hydrocal is a good one. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I like the Quick Rock product. It's
Quick
easier
rock
for
is
me to
easier
get,
to come by.
and it's cheaper. So I can get a 5-gallon bucket of it for about
Mhm.
$65. So
Mhm.
Yeah. So not since you guys brought it up, I mean, people don't see the hundreds of hours that we didn't get a cast or we didn't get heard anything.
mhm.
One of the things that I noticed in the area that I researched, I was leaving items designed to collect DNA, and I'd go back, I'd create a 24-hour window, become part of a routine, do it every Thursday, pick it up every Friday. Have to kayak forever to get up there and pick it up and kayak back out. But I always wondered, do they come out 5 minutes after I leave or in the middle of the night, and then all of a sudden, after 5 or 6 weeks of interaction of getting things moved and DNA samples collected, they started knocking while I was there. And the first time that happened, it was probably the most surreal thing, walking in the dark from my kayak to this clearing and hearing a knock right behind me froze me in my tracks. And I hear one in front of me and I'm like, holy smokes, they're here right now. And I can't even describe to you how like small you feel at that moment. But when you guys are out there, I mean, in all these hours, you've had to have had experiences where you've heard things or had interactions while you're out there, or
As far as knocks go, I've only heard knocks over in Sam Houston National Forest
yeah.
in Texas, but the only experience I can think I could tell you was the first time we went out there in 2018 in spring, and we went down the creek, and there was a point where I just felt so overwhelmed with anxiety and sick that I had to like get out of the area for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I could tell you.
yeah, it was a strange day.
Kind of a
That was
nauseous
weird.
feeling.
It's something I've never felt before, and I've never felt again. So I couldn't. And I mean, I know what anxiety feels like. I've dealt with it my whole life, but
Yeah.
this was different. This was very different.
I've heard people describe things similar, and of course, when they try to describe exactly how it made them feel, everybody reacts to things differently. So it's not likely that two people are going to describe that same feeling the same. But that's something that you hear a lot. I think that of somebody who's had something like that, been in an area and felt something that it's not easy for them to describe or put words to because they've never really felt it before. like for you, you say, you know what anxiety feels
It was
like. You know
crazy.
what it's different than that.
Remember, Brian? I was like, I have to get out of this area.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah, it was strange because I'd never seen him act that way before.
yeah.
So
Like,
definitely caught us off guard that day. So
So I got somebody asking, are you seeing orbs or other phenomena like cloaking? That is from ATM Machine.
no, I haven't seen
nothing
anything
like that.
so.
I haven't seen it either. We've seen orbs on some of the live cameras that Doug has out, and a lot of them, he's got 9 live cameras out there running nonstop, and a lot of times you'll figure out that it was a dust particle with the light hitting it right, or moisture, or an insect. But there's also a few of them that are, I don't know that there is a natural explanation to, but I'm kind of the mindset that I believe orbs probably are a real phenomena. How they're related to Bigfoot, I don't have any research data to show that they are.
Sure.
People will describe saying they've seen orbs around a Bigfoot when they see one. But for everybody who said that, I could have 5 other people say they never saw any orbs around an encounter. And then there's a lot of people say they saw orbs, but it has nothing to do with a Bigfoot sighting. So I jokingly say until I see Bigfoot fart out an orb at some point, I don't know if I can say they're related somehow,
That'd be cool.
But they're both real phenomena, I assume.
Yeah.
Have you seen any indication of Bigfoot seasonal migration?
Yes.
Yeah, good question.
Oh yeah. What do you think, Brian? Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead. You were ready to go.
Okay. So definitely from January to spring, right before it hits summer, we're getting this, this evidence. After that, nothing. Zero.
Do you think it's resource related, or is it a completely different? I guess I should rephrase that. In some of the areas in northern Minnesota, you'll have one area where the berries will dry up or something will happen, and they might adjust and move 20, 25 miles to someplace that had recent rainfall and the berries aren't dried up. Whereas other times you might have them just move hundreds of miles because seasonally that's where they're going to spend the next couple months, or whatever. Do you think they actually leave that area for a significant time?
I think so, in my opinion. And I think Shane and I may differ on this just a little bit, but I think what we found is we're seeing a mating pattern around that March, April time. That's when we started seeing the tracks being together. We're assuming the larger 20-inch maybe being the male. I think we were at count of 2 or possibly 3 different 16-inch tracks, right, Shane?
So definitely 2 different 16-inchers. There's definitely 2.
And so maybe those are the females, and it's just like the old buck and doe. The buck comes by, he's walking through there every so often, hoping he can get the timing right to catch that doe there. And I think that's what we ran into. Where they go from there, I don't know. Do they move a little bit more south? How far do they go? That's really hard to say.
Hey, Brian, do you have that 16-inch on hand that has like that little part on the hill that's kind of, I don't know, it might have been like, it was the first time you went out there and cast, and it has like that, yeah, the original.
Yeah, I have it.
And it has like the little thing on the hill, because that was really cool, because this was in 20, let me see. And go down to, yeah. That little bump, that little,
that's pretty good.
Yes. So, and that was in 2018, and in January 2019, Mr. Bill, the 16-inch he cast, had the exact same foot and the exact same, whatever that is, a callus, whatever. And then that other guy
on this one, the toe is
that one's awesome.
Has an indention right here that's kind of shaped like a spade, and then the other 16-inch we found, she's got a rounder toe. She doesn't. Have that
like this one right here, dude, like this one. So like the big toe is more rounded.
Yeah.
But you can like actually see the anatomy. You can see this.
Yeah.
You can see, let's see. I'm sorry, the camera. Hang on, the camera. Let's see. It's kind of hard to see that. Hang on a second.
I think we can see it pretty decent. It's just so cool that you're casting
right here.
detailed enough
Right here,
identifying
where
features.
the twig actually pushed in on the tissue. Like there was actually part of the twig is still in there, but it went across and it, just like us, like if we step barefooted or if we step on the playground of rocks barefooted, or you put your hands and all the rocks kind of stick into your hand. It's tissue. It's just how it operates.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and you got to factor in the weight that these carry and the energy they put down in a foot placement, that it's going to embed it, maybe not permanently, but for a short time.
It's going to go in there, right?
Yes. To it for a little bit, for a few
steps.
For a few steps until it shakes it off on this.
Yeah, we try to recreate our own tracks there next, parallel to the tracks that we find. And even at that time, Shane, I was probably 250, 260, and wearing cowboy boots with a sharp, heel, and I was barely making an impression.
Man, we even got your son to go out there.
Yeah, and my son's a big kid.
Big old feet.
Yeah, my son's got big feet, and we used him just to practice
to walk and run
versus the
quick
rock stuff. Yeah, we had him walk through an area, we had him run through an area just to try to get motion, and you could tell. Of course,
through the same kind of
human foot. You can definitely see the arch in his foot.
Well, I think that's one of the things that's hardest for some people to, I shouldn't say hardest, but it's something that people need to consider, is that a track is a track. Okay. I mean, what left it there is what we question, but a track is going to be a track. The real analysis isn't just in what left it. It's what is this track put into? How much energy and weight does it take to duplicate what I'm looking at? Has it, in the last 12 hours, did the weather conditions contribute to this ground getting firmer or softer? And, you start working it back like that, you start understanding that we're not just talking about the track or what left it. We're talking about what it was left in. And it's amazing how many times people find a track like that and then they jump on a spot next to it and say, I couldn't even put in a dent. But, in the same aspect, I living in a kayak half the summer, I've walked across surfaces that a half an inch of rain I would have sunk in knee deep on. Mm-hmm. So understanding how moisture or how dry heat affects those surfaces is a large part of you guys getting tracks and understanding how old they may be or how much weight it would have taken to put that track there. But
Jeff, I have even taken my shoes off and walked side by side in the same creek bed at the time, and I don't leave nothing. I think I was 240 at the time. I don't leave nothing significant.
So ATM also asks, have you ever had any language communication?
I've had howls, but not at the Squatch Creek area, just in our bison area. I actually have a really good one that recorded it in November 2017. So.
Yeah, that recording is absolutely bone-chilling.
Along with a rock throwing incident while my son was, we were there actually deer hunting, and I took him there to deer hunt so I could do Bigfoot stuff because I really didn't care to deer hunt, anymore. But he had a rock thrown at him while he was sitting down waiting on some deer, and he's a Bigfoot non-believer, even with all the cast and everything else that they don't exist to him. So, but when he heard that howl that night and all night into the next night, I think he's at least open to the idea now. So,
Doug was commenting on some things being talked about in chat. He says it's very doubtful black bear could make a loud echoing wood knock sound. It certainly has never been witnessed. Yep, they clack their teeth a lot when irritated. I'll tell you what, if Doug's going to comment on anything, if he's telling you something about a bear, you might get your pencil out and write it down, because that guy, probably more than anything he's ever studied in his life, was studying bears. He was one of the first ones he was the first one to put uh, lipstick 4K cameras in a bear den, and I believe he
Whoa.
videoed a bear giving birth during hibernation, which hadn't been seen before. And one of the things he started noticing, this is something we worked into our research last year, was that a lot of the garbage and litter that these bears were kind of collecting when they built these dens was blue items, blue plastic, blue bottle caps, blue Dasani water bottle chewed up, wrappers. There was a lot of different garbage, but for some reason they were keying in on this color. And that's when me and him had started the discussion of, caribou see at a UV vision spectrum. Science has acknowledged that, and likely other animals do. A lot of scientists believe that deer do, a lot of canines do. But one of the things that Doug felt strongly about was that it's likely that bears do. And that's where we started asking the questions: is it possible Sasquatch could see in a UV vision spectrum? Which would explain some things that we're greatly failing to understand, meaning game cameras. Why don't they get any pictures? When I put on my glasses, I paid extra for these lenses to be covered in a UV filtered film so that the sunlight doesn't damage my eyes. The same thing on your camera or on your phone camera. The cover on there has a UV filter on it. The things that make plastics hard and durable are made because there's more acrylic resin in it. So game cameras, one of the things the industry did was they tried to make them resistant to being chewed up by bears. So they wanted them to be incredibly hard plastic, which means they put more acrylic resin in it. All of these things, if you look at in a UV vision spectrum, will shine like fireflies. A camera lens from 100 yards away, doesn't matter how camouflaged in that camera is, how many branches are around it, will look like a little LED diode from, a quarter mile away at dark if you're looking at it in a UV vision spectrum. Those plastic buckles on your backpack, they make so they don't break so easy, have so much acrylic resin in it, they reflect in a UV vision spectrum. So that's one of the things we started thinking, man, maybe there's something to this, because it would explain why we can't get so many pictures on game cameras. They see these plastics, they see these lens reflections, but it's just, I only bring it up. I digress. I probably shouldn't have went into
No,
that.
you're good.
Oh, no.
Doug's research with bears really kind of led our conversation into,
That's really cool that he
in the
got
UV
the footage
vision
of that.
spectrum,
Yeah.
what are we talking about here, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we missing something if they could do that? But
That is yet to be discovered, sir.
yeah. So typically when you guys are in your area, is it just you call a few of the others that are in your alliance and see who's available, or is it you two alone a lot, or how does a normal weekend come about when you guys are heading out?
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple chats set up, on Messenger with some of the guys, and we'll start bouncing ideas around when who's available, who can go, which location, and then we'll just kind of make plans from there. A lot of times it's small, there may be 5 or 6 of us, and that's it. Sometimes Shane can go and I can't, vice versa. It could be Dustin, it could be Kendall, it could be Mr. Bill, it could be Tim, one of those guys.
Darren.
Yeah, Darren come up.
Darren.
So we'll just pick a spot, and Bison is an area that we hit a lot. Squatch Creek obviously is an area that we hit a lot. Squatch Creek is more of a especially for Shane and I, because it's about an hour or so from both of us. We can either
That's
meet
like
there.
over 2 hours for me, just a little bit over 2 hours.
About an hour 15 for me. And so we can either meet there, or I'll cruise through one day and just kind of check the creek. I may be there for a couple hours, then I leave, and Shane may cruise through there, and we're just taking turns alternating through it. Tim may cruise through there, but sometimes we'll meet up and say, hey, let's pound the brush here and see what we can find.
And we've talked to the locals
Yeah,
there
big
also,
thing.
and there's
Sure.
quite a history before we even started casting tracks out there. I mean, there's even a gentleman that cast a 16-inch track that has the same exact hill thing.
Yeah.
As Brian and Bill has, like before we even knew about it.
Yeah, even
So,
talking to a local lady there that worked for a city, because we were talking about maybe doing a conference there, more, I guess not more of a conference, more of a town hall, just so we can get the
Mhm.
local. Because when I say small town, there's, I don't know, Shane, less than 100 people probably live around
Yeah,
there.
man,
I mean,
it's
it's super
tiny.
small. And when I talked to her about it, I was kind of reluctant to say why I wanted to reserve this building for this event. And I said, well, just it's kind of silly, but we're kind of looking for Bigfoot in your area. I mean, she didn't miss a beat. She's like, "Oh yeah, we've been dealing with those things for years around here." Like, it's just like, anything else for her. So that was pretty cool, and
They're
I
like
really
ducks,
liked the
man.
response.
Like
Yeah,
when you talk to them about it, it just rolls right off their back, and they're just like, okay, now what's the weather like? Whatever.
It's
You know?
amazing how there are areas of the country that are like that. I mean, most people who live in the remote areas of the Pacific Northwest will tell you, you go into a coffee shop and say, has anybody ever had any experience with something they couldn't explain that could have been Bigfoot related? Heck, half the coffee shop probably raise their hand in the area. It's kind of like that at a bait shop in northern Minnesota, and probably like that in some of the more remote areas that you guys find yourselves in southern Oklahoma. You'll find people who just are comfortable talking about it, and there are other areas that it's just difficult to get people to open up and talk.
yeah.
But
Well, it's a little more mainstream now.
Mhm.
I know you talked about it earlier with, like, oh, it's just another podcast about Bigfoot, but it's, I mean, it's huge, especially here in Oklahoma. I don't know about you guys
yeah,
up there, but you go southeast Oklahoma, you can't pass a store
Oh
that
my
doesn't have a
gosh.
Bigfoot shirt or Bigfoot sign or some kind of
sure,
Bigfoot in their name.
Gas Squatch.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of an accepted thing now. So
Yeah.
it's not so taboo if you go to somebody and say, "Hey, I saw Bigfoot last weekend while I was hiking." Maybe 30 years ago, people look at you like you're crazy and that you need to be put somewhere in a mental hospital. But now they're just kind of like, "Oh, really? You saw one? Like that's cool.
Cool.
Where?" So it's
Well,
a little more accepting now. So
I would agree. I think that's probably one of the beneficial things to mainstream programming.
sure,
Whether or not you're a fan of Killer Bigfoot and Unsolved this and the
yeah,
fact is it's the subjects out there
yeah,
almost every night on some channel that people are watching and people are talking about. Whether or not you agree with what they're talking about is
Mhm.
different, but
yeah,
it's not a taboo subject, so to speak, anymore like it
sure,
maybe was.
yeah.
Um, we got Joe from Western New York Bigfoot Investigation Group saying, have the fellas ever shown anthropologists or biologists those casts?
Oh, okay. So
Go ahead, Shane.
uh, one time we had someone come up to us and say, according to Dr. Jeff Meldrum, a 20-inch cast is fake because it's 20 inches. But here's my argument with that is, and a lot of people like to talk about Meldrum's data set. I mean, is it complete?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you know? Who, who can gauge the maximum size of any of this?
Shane,
Because
is the argument that he hasn't seen casts in that high, long of a range to
and
accept that,
and
or
that
was the argument that structure-wise, bone density, the whole thing that's just too
I think
big
it's a
to
little bit of
believe?
both. I think
Yeah, I
it's
think
a
it's a
little
little
bit
bit
of
of both.
both.
But I think also it's beyond the realm of possibility. Even when we found this track, and Shane can testify to this, the group walked by this thing the first couple times, and then I just got lucky and happened to see it just because of the
The
way the light
sun
was.
changed
Yeah,
Mhm.
just a
but
little
even
bit.
when I got to it and kinda rolled the leaves back a little bit, I still couldn't wrap my head around that it was real.
Yeah,
And we stared at it for several minutes, and I was just like, "This that's not a
like a
foot."
bunch of
Yeah.
schoolgirls.
was like, it's not a footprint. And another guy, Kendall, had to tell me, he's like, that is a footprint. We're going to cast it. And of course, it was the only one that day. But once we poured it, pulled it out, cleaned it off, exposed it. Yeah, obviously it was a footprint.
We were in awe.
I couldn't wrap my head around it though.
If I was to offer my opinion on it, I guess from Meldrum's perspective, or any anthropologist or biologist perspective, if they haven't seen enough of them in that size range, I guess naturally there's a reluctance to accept it as easily as you would maybe a 16 or 17 inch track.
Yeah.
From the same regard, I heard two pretty well versed a biologist and an anthropologist having a conversation about casts, and they were looking at some individual casts, and one of them had made a comment that they had a cast that was, I believe it was a Florida cast, and it was 16 inches long. And he said, man, that thing would have had to have been huge. And I started thinking, but would it? Because it prompted me to do some research. I looked up Shaquille O'Neal.
Mm-hmm.
Shaquille O'Neal's 7 foot, whatever, 4 or whatever he was. He's huge, 7'3", 7'4". But he wore a size 22 shoe. And at one point he did wear a size 23 in some brands. They said that his shoe, the length of his foot was 15.25 inches. And that across the widest part, it was 5.5 or 5.75 inches. The guy only weighed 320. I mean, it's a lot of weight. Sure. He had a lot of, not just fat. He wasn't fat. He had bone density and everything else. But, we're not even talking 7.5 foot tall and 350 pounds yet. And it's 15.5 inches. I'm thinking something that's 8.5 foot tall, 9 foot tall, weighing 1,000 pounds. Is it really off the grid to let your mind think that it could have a 20-inch track or even bigger? I mean, this is a human who wasn't anywhere near that size, had a 15.5 inch long foot. So, I guess when you look at kind of the balance of the conversation, you start realizing, I'm not here to say Jeff Meldrum's right or wrong. I'm just saying I've got an open enough mind to look at this and say, I don't get where I could discount that as being authentic just because I haven't seen a lot of 20-inch tracks.
Correct.
But more people get out there and find tracks, maybe we'll develop a larger data system, a catalog to say there are tracks that big and bigger maybe.
Now, Jeff, like when Brian first went out in 2018, him and Tim Autry, and they cast these 16-inch tracks, I actually got to show up the next day, right? And Brian and I, we just got to looking at it. I love looking at shit with Brian. Me and Brian are looking. We're going to look at it.
Yeah.
So Brian's kind of noticing that there's a fresh green branch break above the second and third track. That lines up with something in that direction and this breaking. So we just measured it. It measured 8 foot 10 inches as a snap off green branch break. So if a 16-inch track leaving individual, as some people say, is 8 foot 10 inches, that's just being skeptical, just looking at what we're seeing. I mean, what does that leave a 20-inch track leading, individual,
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things that, I think everybody can agree on. The one thing we don't have enough in the conversation are firm facts. And if we're going to frame the parameters of what we're going to discuss could be possible and what likely isn't, I don't know that it makes it easy to discount things like that.
Never. I agree.
So Doug asked, do the tracks have any signs of dermals, aka friction ridges?
Yeah, that's a toss up.
I
I've
think
had
so,
guys
a
look at them,
little bit.
and yeah, I've had guys say,
I mean,
yeah,
look at this,
thermal
Jeff. Like
ridges.
you can actually see like where two leaves are in the track. Like,
To me, it's not conclusive enough that it's a dermal ridge
yeah,
for me personally. But I've had
you know,
other. We've taken these to conferences and had Bigfoot people come and look at them, and some people say, "Oh, I see a lot of dermal ridges going on in there." I
we don't know
personally, I
that.
don't see it, but um, I'll let them make that call. So
I think that unless you're talking about that perfect Georgia red clay castable, holds its moisture a long period of time for days and days. Dermal ridges are one of the first things to disappear in a cast. As you lose moisture content because of breeze or sunlight, dermal ridges are going to shrink and level out. And I would say that in a lot of conditions are probably gone within 12 hours, maybe, depending on what the substrate that you leave it in. You got to have either some pretty good timing or some really perfect conditions as far as the substrate it left it in for it to actually hold dermal ridges for more than a day, let's say. But, that's my opinion. I'm not saying it's right, but God, I mean, finding one that you can look at and see those dermal ridges and that you often see in handprints or fingerprints, it's like it just takes the perfect storm, I think, when it comes to conditions and timing. But let's see here. What else? Anybody else got some questions? We got one here from Nancy Ghost Hunter. Say people will fake evidence. Is that a Bigfoot
Oh yeah,
researcher
oh
problem
yeah,
too?
definitely, yeah, unfortunately. So
Probably
unfortunately.
more so.
yeah, a good majority of it, I would think. So
Mm-hmm.
and also, I should probably reword that. Um, I don't think everything is fake. I think some things, like especially with sightings, is just misidentification. I think in a lot of people's head, what they saw they think is Bigfoot, but it could have been something else when you start talking to those folks. And you don't want to just come right out and say, "Hey, I think you're lying. You saw a black bear."
Mm-hmm.
But in their head, what they saw, so they're not really lying to you per se.
Yeah.
It's their interpretation, and perception is everything for people, right?
Maybe they're not putting a realistic enough
Yeah,
filter on what could be and what maybe it isn't. They're just so hopefully optimistic that they don't employ any caution as to what else it could be.
yeah, and you get the situation. Somebody takes someone who they're not in the woods a lot. They spend most of their time in the city. They're not in nature, and they take a weekend vacation to a cabin somewhere, and they see a bear standing up and it's behind a tree a little bit. Well, to them, it's probably Bigfoot, right? Because bears don't walk on their hind legs. To them, they don't see that. So you can't really fault a lot of those people and say, "Oh, everybody's lying," because and they'll probably go to their grave thinking they saw Bigfoot when
Mm-hmm.
all actuality it was something pretty common. So.
Donald Fuller, he says, would they sell a copy of one of them casts? Would love to smelt that in aluminum.
Whoa, that would be a trip.
Donald probably mounted on a Harley, knowing Donald.
So the reason why
Have it-
Shane made the mold is because we had friends, in our group that are, unfortunately weren't able to get some of these casts. So Shane did all the work to make that rubber mold so we could pour replicas and give them away to friends. So
Mhm.
I'm sure that's probably something we could arrange if you
The
get
next
in.
one I really want to mold, Jeff, is back in January 2019, the 20-inch guy. He was stepping in about 5 foot and some change strides. And then he did what it looked like at the creek was like a stutter step, kind of like maybe like us before we jump over something or
Sure.
try to get our footing. And then
Timing.
on the other side of the creek, it just crashed through the bank.
Yeah.
Well, we cast all that.
Yeah. It was
We
a,
cat.
it was,
You can
it was
see the
motion.
toes going through.
Yeah.
Wow.
Get the motion of the toes as they
Oh
go
my!
down and come up.
I
Yeah.
think
It's
that's
amazing.
our best piece of evidence we have.
It is. It is.
It,
It's the one track that shows motion.
because I have it over here. Let me get it real quick.
It definitely shows where something just kind of goes through the bank.
Now, oh my gosh, look at my hat. Oh, here, let's just do that. So, so during January 2019, Mr. Bill, he sends us a picture with his billfold next to a track, and it's like a calling all cars moment,
Yeah.
And there was we ran out of plaster, but and this broke, but I had the other half over there. But this is our 20-inch guy. Okay.
Well, look at the size of the thumbs, almost the size of your hand, or the size of the big toes, almost the size of your.
And actually, a deer stepped right here too. You can see where it's like kind of like a deer mark. So you see how flat this is, because he was walking on flat surface. But when it went over the creek, you can see. And I wish I had it up here. I can go get it if you want me to. This big toe is bent. You can actually see it going through.
Yeah, like he's
its
lunging
footing.
up. Yeah.
Like it's trying not to slide back and lose ground as it lands.
But it is sliding, because you can see all 5 toes just and it gets its footing and goes.
Wow.
It was like boom.
That's interesting.
Explosive.
Yeah. If we could make a replica of it, it'd be amazing. So.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to that too. I mean, people say, well, geez, if you saw a track, why didn't you cast it? Casting a track isn't like taking a picture of something. I mean, it can be a difficult process. And a lot of times you look at a track and say, oh, let's cast it. And you realize this is a track that's really hard to cast, When they lay a track down like you're talking about after it comes over the creek, you're talking about going through a grass layer, a compacted thatch layer into the dirt, the top soil, the dirt, and digging into a point to where everything that was there starts giving away.
In wintry mixed weather.
Yeah.
Jeff, we built a little fire so we could put coals on top of the plaster to help cure it, because this stuff kind of heats up as it's curing, but it was so cold. I mean, this is like you wake up in the morning and you got frost on your tent, cold.
Yeah.
But we were determined. So
that's not cold here in northern Minnesota. That's
not for you guys.
Yeah, that's like June. That's like June here, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's Oklahoma cold.
I live in Texas, man.
We get cold here, but it only lasts.
You can do cold, but I can do hot, sir. I can do hot.
So have you guys spent any time really researching outside of that Oklahoma, Texas area? Have you ever been over in the Adirondacks or have you ever met anybody else doing research, or has it just kind of been that's your area?
It was one of those things, like when we first started talking about the group and stuff, we're called Southern Bigfoot Alliance, because I was like, oh my God, man, there's so much greenery. We can only focus on maybe this much. Like if we can just really put all of our focus on this much, I mean, Jeff, you've got it covered up there, Jeff. You know what I mean? That's how we think. Jeff's got it covered.
Well, I see, like I'm friends with Matt from Central Florida Bigfoot. Matt's got a great talent of photography and analyzing what he's looking at. In Florida, I went from the mindset of really how many Bigfoots are in Florida. Then I start seeing how remote it is and how hard it is because the remote areas aren't 200 miles by 100 miles, but they're dense areas that there's a reason nobody goes through there, because as a human, you can barely walk through there, and it's filled with poisonous snakes and alligators. And you start looking at footage of the Green Swamp, east of Tampa, and you start realizing the more I look at it, I think that's really an interesting place, right? I mean, I wouldn't mind going there. I start putting a bucket list together of these different areas I'd like to go, and then the more you get into this, you start trying to organize your vacation schedule around those areas. Like, I don't care if the kids want to go to Disney World. We're going to the Green Swamp,
Man, you would never guess what we've captured on our game camera out there. It was, Brian, you want to tell Jeff about all that?
Well, so it's just so crazy. Oklahoma's known for one thing on Netflix right now, the last couple of years. Tiger King.
Sure.
Everybody knows Tiger King, Joe
Yep.
Exotic, all of his stuff. We were checking cameras, and we had a camera pointed to the north. I guess it's the north property fence of where we're at. They run some cattle on there. There's some longhorn cattle, and we're flipping through there, and I believe it's early one morning. We see this longhorn standing there. Next picture, there's a cat. Of course, we have mountain lions here in Oklahoma. It's not crazy.
Mhm.
We kind of brushed through it, didn't think much about it other than it was cool. Started really looking at it and was like, that's not a mountain lion. We sent the photo to somebody who has experience with large cats. We got the message back that that's actually a female African lion and wanted to know where it was. We contacted the game warden. That was crazy. We had to sit on the photo for a while. He didn't want us to release it because he didn't want pandemonium in the area.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, we lost contact with him. He actually quit responding to me, quit answering my calls, quit replying to my texts. So we released the photo here a few weeks ago. But what we have is a female
African lion.
And this was what year was this, Shane? We took that photo.
2020. Just 2 years ago.
Well, here about a month ago, which is not very far from there. It's actually between Squatch Creek and where Mr. Joe had his exotic zoo. There was a police report of a lion in the middle of I-35 alive, and she was just sitting there in between north and south lanes, and that they had game wardens en route to figure out what they were going to do with her. So, yeah, it was crazy because we had spent so much time out there camping there, hiking there that, we were always worried about, the weirdos that may walk around out there, and we didn't know that we should have been on high alert for an African lion who may have been hungry. And I would have hated to have to shoot Shane in the ankle and get away. I love him to death, but I mean,
oh man,
self-preservation is everything for me right now.
You got to have somebody slower than you in that.
I got to practice my ducking and dodging.
Yeah. You can be slow or be fast, but you can't outrun that gun to the knee or to the ankle.
So Jeff, between the lion and actually we cast some alligator tracks out there too.
Yeah.
We started calling the place Jumanji.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
We don't know what's going to be out there.
Yeah. There's going to be a giraffe out there one of these days. What's going on here?
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, maybe you would expect that in Florida. You got a lot of exotic game farms. You've got a lot of invasive species that over the years were let go, between iguanas and different snake species. And there's just a lot of things in Florida that doesn't seem like they're supposed to be there, but they are. But when you start talking about Oklahoma and places, you kind of, maybe you operate under a little bit of assumption that you aren't going to see a female lion, African lion. I mean,
Yeah, it totally caught us off guard. So
in South Dakota, we have a lot of mountain lions, and up in northern Minnesota, believe it or not, in my research area last year, I had a lynx that I was kept running into each week.
That's cool.
It would follow me up the river, like, just curious, it wasn't, they aren't huge. This thing is probably 50 pounds.
Wonder what Jeff tastes like.
Well, I made the mistake one day of I seen it, and then I'd paddle for a while, and there it would be up in front of me again, like it was making a game of paralleling me, going through the brush and stuff, getting in front of me, and then it'd just be out on the rocks as I'd paddle by. And I'd keep going, and then another half mile up, it'd be on the rocks. Like, it kept passing me. You'd never know it. You couldn't hear it. And I thought, well, that was weird. So the next week when I went up there, I grabbed a package of yellow perch fillets out of my freezer. And as I was paddling up that next week, I saw it again. So I threw a couple fish fillets up and from that point on, it was like I couldn't paddle up there without it being like, it was just, it really must have habitated in that area at that point. I don't know if it had cubs or if there was something that was keeping it in that area, but
You had somebody ask what was behind me. Sasquatch. Not everybody knew that.
what's
It's
behind you, please?
So a friend of mine who he makes appearances dressed as Bigfoot, he ended up getting a new costume, and so he was selling this one, and it's just on a mannequin body, and you can hear it. And I just set it up here behind us, and it's just a conversation piece. I tell you what, the first time I set it up, I had it in the living room, right by my back door, and I come down the hall the very next morning, kind of still half asleep, going to the kitchen. And I about screamed like a little girl. I'm not gonna lie. When I glanced over, and this thing was standing there by the door. So I ended up moving him back here to the office, and it freaks people out. So
It's fun when your conversation piece can also be a wow factor for some people. But no, so you got any big outings on the horizon planned, or?
Well, for sure, October we're going to, and this one I say this because I'm looking forward to this one so much. These people have a property. It's 500 acres. Call it the Aqua 5. I call it the Aqua 500 because there's lots of water sources. There's been a lot of encounter visual. One guy was chased out of there. His blind and everything is still back there. He just left everything there and got out of Dodge. The locals, there's only so many neighbors, and they call what they see out there, they call it the blur. That's all they call it, is the blur. And the guy we've been talking with, like his mom and dad have both laid eyes on these. He has himself. And I went out there and checked it out one day. And I was like, oh my God, I got to come back out here. This is outstanding. So that's in October. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah,
for sure.
And then we have the Honubby Bigfoot Conference, which is in South Oklahoma. It's in October also, first weekend of October. We try to make that one, and that's just really
great.
Yeah, that's
Where's
just
that one at?
South Oklahoma.
Yeah,
a little town called Honubby. If you ever heard of the Siege of Honubby, which is a famous Bigfoot encounter.
Yeah, that was really intense encounter.
So it's a great conference. It's just a chance for us to kind of get with some friends and stuff like that, and kind of catch up. So
Yeah, sounds like fun. So just gonna ask you about you. So you guys, you have a YouTube channel, and then you guys went on a little hiatus, and now recently came back.
Yeah, we took about a year hiatus.
Yeah. What, anything you missed strong enough to come back, or was it just you said I'm going to take a month off, and that turned into 2 months, and then it turned into 6 months?
We actually signed a contract for a television show, and we started filming. And one of the things that we didn't read in the fine print was that we couldn't do our own show.
Sure.
We couldn't do anyone else's show. So
couldn't talk about what we're doing.
Couldn't talk about it. Couldn't disclose anything. And then everything was going great. And then they kind of asked us to do some things that were unethical, and we disagreed. So the show kind of went flat, and we had to wait for our contract to expire. And
which was August 18th or 19th?
Yeah, I think it was August 18th. So we're free, unsigned free agents, I guess you could say, right now, and so we're ready to talk. So
yes,
I haven't read my contract with Untold Radio yet. There may be things I'm not allowed to do, and I'm not going to read it just because I don't want to know.
There you go.
What they are.
Yeah, and we didn't even think to question that, because they knew we did a show.
Yeah.
So we were kind of caught off guard that, here we go in and they're like, hey, you guys can't do your show. Like, that's kind of strange for us. You can't talk about this. You can't talk about that, where you're going, things that's happened to you in the past. You can't show any of your evidence. So it really handcuffed us. So
it would have been fine if like we were making something that was true to us, but we're not Scoob and the gang. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had us out there looking a little goofy.
I
So
was like, oh my God.
yeah.
Get the shirt
Well, I
off
mean,
me.
there are NDA type issues that are real concerns. I mean,
They are.
the research that I did last year and the DNA samples that I collected, the intention is to put them with Darby Orcutt through some, a lab and possibly use it on the Legend Meat Science too when it comes out. And everything gets delayed. I mean, nothing operates on your time frame. It's not like you own the lab or you own the production company or you own whatever. I mean, you're always working on somebody else's timeline. The last thing I want to do is go out and just kind of take the wow factor out of it, but yet so I've gotten some criticism for that, but yet then again I've also said I'm willing to submit these samples to the biggest microscope I think you could put something like that under. I mean, if they come back as not being authentic, life goes on for me, but I put an awful lot of work into collecting. I mean, I'm pretty dead set that I know what I collected, but it'd be like hit me in the side of the head with a 2x4 if somebody said these aren't real, but that's the microscope you put it under. I get why they don't want me going online and saying, hey, I put them in, or this is what I heard from the lab, or this is what I did on my own in having them analyzed. So there's always going to be shows that if you're involved with any type of production, they're going to want you to agree to things. Doing a little YouTube bit with, a couple hundred followers that get together and share some laughs and info, you kind of wonder what trade secrets are we putting at risk here. But, what do you guys have? I was going to say, somebody else
I was looking at your comments.
had asked what counties in Oklahoma do you guys research? I guess you could probably disclose a county without getting too.
Yeah, I mean, is that where we research or where we live? I think somebody asked where we live. I'm not sure what that was.
Oh, I just now put on the comments, so I've been like lost.
Somebody's asking what county you're in Oklahoma.
Yeah, so I
if you don't want to answer, you don't have to.
Oh, I'm not worried about it. It's Oklahoma. There's 77 counties. So I live in central Oklahoma. So it's Canadian County. I'm pretty easy to find. But the research we do is McCurtain County, south of LaFleur County. That's the area in southeast that we're mostly in. So.
And as I always say, I live in Texas, but I hang my camping equipment in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I just can't get enough of it, man.
Well, they're both awesome states. Got John Ayers saying, be careful, Jeff. Ignorance of the law won't stand up. A signature is all that is needed. Yeah, I
very true.
I jokingly say that because I did, the luxury, or I should say, the one thing that I can appreciate is that joining the Untold Radio Network, me and Doug kind of shot across each other's bows ideas. This is half a year ago of a network rather than one show a night on 7 different channels, collectively having a network that maybe would have something available every night. And Doug and his sons, Blaine and Alex, have refined that model and brought it forward. And the thing that I really appreciated about it is Doug has done so many productions with different networks, and he knows what it's like to see these some of these insane demands that are placed on you. That with the NDA, what we had talked about being a part of the network, everybody was agreeable to it. It's pretty easy going. So, and it's a, in my opinion, a great collection of people that are involved in it. We've got some of the other hosts, Brian King Sharp. We've got Dean Bertram. We've got Tim Halloran, who just wrote the Bigfoot Influencers book. There's just some great guests, or great hosts. So I'm happy to be a part of it. So I'm also excited that you guys are back on YouTube doing your thing.
Yeah. And Jeff, aren't you coming on Wednesday?
You asked me if I'd come on the show Wednesday. I'd be happy to come on the show Wednesday.
Great.
Hey. All right.
See how many people we can offend. And
I better come see Jeff on Wednesday.
well, here's what you guys should do. Since this is my first week here, I don't have a lot of mod set up. Usually I have a few of my followers are set up with mod status and they're throwing links in the chat and all this. But after we're done here tonight, go back and look in the comments. We're going to put in the comments a link to your guys' YouTube channel.
Okay.
Just go ahead and post it in one of the first comments so that anybody who's watching this or listening on one of the podcast platforms, if you want to find Brian Hulan and Shane Church with the Southern Bigfoot Alliance on YouTube, just go look in the comments here on YouTube and you'll see it. I'll also share the link to their channel on my Pine Island Research page on Facebook, and I believe we'll probably put it up on the Untold Radio one too in the comments for the show tonight. So, but yeah, we'd be happy to promote you. I mean, hopefully we don't get people. I always think, hey, I'll do them a favor and send them some subscribers. Heck, 10 people might unsubscribe because I said that. So hopefully it helps and doesn't hurt you, right?
It'll balance out, Jeff. It'll balance out, man.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate you guys joining us tonight. It was awesome having you. I look forward to talking to you on Wednesday night. That'll be fun.
Yes.
We're going to have you back again at some point. I'm going to have to come to Oklahoma. I want to see these cats in person, man.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Those things just are, it's one thing to see them on camera, but man, I want to hold them and look at them. You know?
Hold them and look at it. It's totally different.
Totally, completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's stay friends and keep in touch, and we'll get you back on. Maybe by the next time we get you on, you'll have if you've got 14 and 3.5 years. Geez, if I just give you 3-4 months, you might have 1 or 2 more. You know,
be nice.
That would be awesome.
It's been real quiet there lately, so
yeah, it's all right. We don't give up.
You never know. You never know when the winds are gonna come.
Yep.
The winds of change.
Yep.
Too stubborn to give up, unfortunately. So.
Well, if you guys want to hang around just for a moment, I'll talk to you backstage, but I'm going to pop out and do the outro here. So I appreciate you guys joining us.
Thanks for having us on.
You bet. What great guests. I'm honored that they joined us for the first episode because, we're hoping to start something that's long lasting and interesting and productive here. Something that it's not just entertaining, but it's informative. Could be used as a resource if we get good researchers who share good information. I think we can all learn from people like that. And so I'm excited about it. A long run of episodes here on Untold Radio. Invite you guys to not only subscribe to the channel and like tonight's show, but stay tuned into what the other shows are. Now, I get that that's not everybody's cup of tea, right? Like if you're in that Sasquatch community and you're like, I'm not into the UFO stuff, I don't like this or that, I can appreciate that. I think the majority of the people that have followed Pine Island Research over the last 8 months, the majority of them have interest in those other areas of phenomena and mysteries. Trying to find answers and truths in those also. But if that's not you, that's cool. I mean, you can show up just on Monday night and watch my show. You don't have to like the guy who does the show on Friday night to be able to come watch us on Monday night. But I would encourage everybody to check out these other shows because I'm telling you, I really think they're all informative and entertaining. It's my personal opinion. I've watched Dean and Jason's show the other night, Mysterious Libraries. I thought it was awesome. They were talking about a book that was interesting. Do I believe everything in the book? Do I subscribe to every theory they covered? I can't say that I do, if I'm being honest. But I enjoyed it. And I think you guys will enjoy a lot of the stuff you're going to find on the network. But I appreciate everybody for picking us to choosing us to spend your Monday night with, because you had a lot of options and you chose Pine Island Research. And that is a something that I'm not blind to, that you chose to come here and spend some time with us. And I love you all for it. Appreciate the support. Appreciate all you guys following us over to the new channel here at Untold Radio. Until next week, Monday night, you guys have a great rest of your week. Recover from the big holiday weekend here, and we will see you soon.